Hello everyone, and welcome to our second week of the Co-Lead program. This is the Colby Olsen Learn, Earn, Achieve, and Dream Co-Lead program, brought to you by the Colby Olsen Foundation. This week we are going to be covering personal branding. So if you weren't with us last week, I do want to reintroduce myself. My name is Eliza Yellowbird, and I am the Director of Student Services and Learning Support at the UA Health Sciences Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Sorrell. I am a learning specialist with the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the University of Arizona, and thank you for being here today.
So this week we will be building off of what we covered last week. Last week we closed with a wonderful video really having you think about who you are, what you aspire to be, and what those different attributes you have are and how you're going to carry that forward. So this week it really comes together as we start talking about personal branding. So with that, this week we really are going to focus on identifying your strengths, identifying some of those developmental opportunities and how that really ties to this personal brand, and really seeing how your different attributes and what you bring can really contribute to your resume, as well as really having you come from a very authentic and genuine place and just have who you are shine above. So we will first begin with looking at Simon Sinek's video on the golden circle. So through this video, you're really going to be able to understand my why. And so this really is getting at your purpose. So thinking back to what we covered in week 1, you'll be thinking of what those priorities are. So remember those priorities that we had you write down. You'll be thinking about how those are connecting to your bigger picture and those action plans and goals that you set up. And now we're really getting into the deeper meaning and motivation behind it. So what is your purpose? What is that thing that drives you as you start making these action plans and moving forward with these next steps? And so you'll see here, as you watch the video, you're going to be asking yourself some of these different questions. So the first one is, why do I do it? How do I do it? And then what do I do? So you'll see in the video, Mr. Sinek really goes through some of these different areas and starts defining this golden circle. And so for folks that are really successful, they really have a good understanding of their purpose, of what's driving them and keeping them motivated as they go through these different steps in life. And so that's what really seems to make the difference for folks that fall into this golden circle of people who succeed with their goals, with these different bigger pictures, with their dreams, and then folks that have a harder time being able to go down those different paths.
This is really important because identifying your purpose is going to be so beneficial in the work that you do, the work that you're striving for, even as you move forward in job applications, personal statements. They're always going to ask you why. Why are you interested in medical school? Why are you interested in this job? So really trying to understand your why is going to be so helpful for you just on your path.
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You ready to buy a computer from me? All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought, and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, you know, there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the dot-com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers' team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich, and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, that's an amazing discovery, guys, now I will improve upon your technology. But he didn't. He wasn't first, he didn't get rich, he didn't get famous, so he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? Something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on this scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Geoffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world, and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad. But he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
So now that you've watched the video, we can really start to explore your purpose and understand greater what your why is. So with that, we'd like to share some of our whys.
So for myself, I've always, being a Native American woman from a small town, when I first came out to the University of Arizona, I struggled. You know, it was tough being underrepresented, and so for me, my biggest purpose and the reason why I do a lot of the work that I do is because I don't want students to have to struggle in the same way that I struggled. A lot of the stuff that we're sharing with you all in these next few weeks are all things that I wish I knew when I was an undergrad, when I was younger. I wish I had someone tell me this stuff. And so my biggest purpose as a learning specialist is to support students and help them along their path as well, so that way they don't feel the same struggle or the same isolation that I felt when I was an undergrad. So that's kind of my biggest purpose, is how can I make things better for students.
Yeah, and in a similar fashion, I think my purpose really stems with helping folks too, specifically helping, you know, Indigenous folks, marginalized students, underrepresented students. I feel like because there are some different obstacles on that path, it really impacts that purpose for me and just the experiences I've had. So when I was in high school, I actually had my high school counselor tell me that she didn't think I'd make it in college. She said, you know, you're growing up on the reservation, you just need to go to the community college kind of down the hill, and you know, you're going to try a 4-year institution and you're not going to make it. And so, of course, me being the feisty person I am, I said, okay, well, I'm going to show you. So from there, that really had a driving purpose for me to A, you know, prove this person wrong, and then B, to really show that no matter, you know, what school I was attending or my background or what have you, that I could make this dream of mine to come to a reality. And so with that, that's really been a driving purpose for me, and wanting to also help students that do come from underrepresented communities and backgrounds to be that kind of driving force for them as well, to make sure that they know that there are folks there that believe in them. And just for me, you know, I've always been raised to be a good ancestor, to bring honor to my family. And so that's always kind of been a purpose for me in the work I do. So really trying to make sure that I'm contributing to my community in some way, that I'm helping uplift students and the youth, and that I'm thinking of those next generations to come. And so trying to make that impact.
And I think that's so important that we share this, because when you say personal brand, I think a lot of times people think it's very, you know, business oriented and very stuffy in the way you're building yourself. But really, it's the core of it is going to be your passion and what and who you are. So don't get too hung up on this idea that you have to put some kind of fake front up there. And like the video said, it's from the inside out. So what your passion is inside is what's going to shine through. And so go with that.
Exactly. And so that really gets into, like Dr. Sorrell was saying, with the video, you see that what really motivates people, as you know, us being consumers or just folks in general within society, can be having that purpose and understanding other people's why, understanding other people's passions. That can really be a motivating factor for us to kind of understand that story, where they're coming from, and really buy into what they are putting out into the universe, really seeing how can I really support your cause, your dream, whatever it might be moving forward. And so I thought it was a really interesting example that they gave in the video where they were talking about Apple. So we all know Apple. Apple is a very popular corporation. And so with that, they really were able to spin it and say Apple, in their whole marketing strategy, is very clear up front about their purpose and their why. And so as folks, when we are looking at different products, it's because we understand where that passion, we understand some of that story and that background, that we really are able to better, you know, make those decisions or better support, you know, that company, what have you. So I think in that process, if you really understand a person's why, it helps really be able to navigate those different steps with them. It helps really be able to make that future path just brighter and better. So with that, now that we've been talking about your purpose, really understanding some of that motivation, now that you're really starting to think about it, this is where we start really getting into manifesting those future dreams. So this is where you're thinking back to those priorities you had, you're thinking back to some of those action plans we made with those goal setting methods, and you're starting to tie it all together and manifest this future. And so what that's going to look like is potential vision boards. And so what we're going to do now is have you watch this video. It's called Draw Your Future. And you're going to see the presenter here actually have you draw out your future. So throughout this video you're watching, we want you to have your piece of paper. We want you to draw where you're at currently, following the video and the prompts, and then draw where you're wanting to be. And then once you watch that, we'll come back together and we'll go on from there.
Maya Angelou once said, "A solitary fantasy can transform 1,000,000 realities." What dream or vision do you want to turn into reality? I always wanted to go into business for myself. I could be a consultant. I'm going to go gluten-free right after I eat that last piece of chocolate cake. You know, one day I'm going to stand up to that crabby boss. I look good on paper. I should feel great. I just know there's more. You know it because you feel it. You lie awake at night. You talk about your dreams with your partner and your friends, but more often than not, you continue to do those same behaviors that keep you from making the change. You ask yourself, how can I make it happen? Research shows the odds against you making a change in your life, 9 to 1. 9 to 1, even if you're facing a life-threatening illness. But let me show you how to beat those odds. You can live the life you desire. It's right there in front of you. But in order to achieve it, you must first see it, then believe it, and then you must graciously ask and train your brain to help you execute your vision. So how do we see our vision? Through a picture. A picture can create movements. A picture can unite nations. A picture can pull at your heart and fill you with a deep desire to do something. At Roche Pharmaceutical, the president asked us to create a picture of his vision. Prior to having one, less than 40% of the employees understood the company's vision and strategy. After seeing this picture, 96% understood it. And 84% understood how what they did every day aligned to that picture. So how can you use a picture to get what you want? By simply drawing one. You don't have to be an artist or know how to draw. As naive as your drawings might be, when you draw where you are, your current state, and where you want to be, your desired new reality, suddenly you have a roadmap for change. So what is your current state? Well, let's say you're Joe. Joe has a good job. Joe has a lovely wife, Amy. Joe makes good money, but like many of us, Joe wants more from life. And he'd like to get rid of a couple of things. Maybe that intense workload. Maybe that negative boss. Maybe Joe has a higher purpose. He's just not sure how to get there. So now, Joe's current state is visual. We remember things better when they're attached to a picture. 65% better, to be exact. So now, let's imagine that Joe wants to change something in his current state. He wants to build that desired new reality that he dreams about. In order for Joe to freely dream, he must first trick his brain. Because the left side of your brain, as you know, houses the critic, who is forever trying to keep you safe from harm, make sure you don't do anything dangerous or stupid. So let's have Joe tell the critic that he's just going to use his imagination. Using your imagination activates the right side of your brain, which makes you creative and filled with possibility. So now, let's dream Joe's new life. In the best case scenario, 1 year from today, what is Joe's life like? Hey, Joe has a new job. All right. Joe has a new boss, himself. Joe has a couple of great collaborators, and Joe is just bursting with creativity and ideas and all of those things we dream about: connection and purpose and freedom and love. Now, I'm drawing this picture as a favor to Joe today, but in real life, he'd have to draw his own picture because he can't afford me. Actually, because you get the most power when you paint your own picture. So now Joe has his drawing, so now he's got to soak it in. He has to fill it with color. He has to fill it with emotion. He has to get inside of it, as if he's on the inside looking out. Your brain actually emits serotonin and oxytocin when you draw and dream. So you feel happy, capable, creative. You feel cool. So now we have Joe's current state and Joe's desired new reality. So how can Joe get from here to there in just 3 bold steps? 3 bold steps. If I knew how to get from here to there in 3 bold steps, I would have done it 25 years ago when I had a mullet. Here's where the magic begins. Your brain knows you. It's cataloged everything you've ever seen, heard, experienced, real or imagined. You just have to ask it to put the pieces together for you. It's as simple as that. We live in a three-dimensional world, but the light falls on the retina in a two-dimensional fashion, and the brain, it has to cope with it. So how does it deal with this extra dimension? It guesses. It guesses. And just as it can guess where your cup of coffee is when it goes to pick it up, it can correctly guess what the 3 bold steps are that you should take. All you have to do is look at your picture and then close your eyes. This allows the brain to recycle what it sees and reconstruct it, add to it everything you've ever seen, heard, experienced, or fantasized about. And then it will serve you up with the best possible solution. If you just relax and you ask it, now what's the boldest thing I could do to get from here to there? Boom, immediately it will tell you. See it? Believe it. Act on it. Now the danger is, if any of those 3 bold steps are too scary, this instinctual, rational side of your brain is going to try to talk you out of this. Oh, no, no, no. I don't want to do that. Oh, that desk, it's not too small. My legs aren't cramped under there. Oh, $20,000 a year. Oh, that's a decent salary. Oh, that boss, he's not that mean to me. You know what? I'm just going to stay right here. I feel really comfortable here. So how can you get yourself to do the boldest thing? By drawing the most compelling picture. So when you look here, you're in pain. It hurts. And when you're here, you're ecstatic. It's fantastic. You're already living inside that connected and free life you drew. So every day you get up, you soak in your picture, you step into the possibility, and this is the most important part, you act on it. You do one small thing. You call up that friend you know who started her own business. You ask her, how'd you do it? You ask Amy, will you support me in my vision? You go to your boss and you ask him for a raise. And you become that one person out of 10 to make change happen. Now I put this template on your chair so that you could do for yourself what I just did for Joe. You've seen some fantastic ideas today that have inspired your dream. I dare you to draw that dream into that template. I double dare you to choose a symbol in your drawing that represents that desired new reality. Take a picture of it with your phone and send it to us at TEDx Rainier. Maya Angelou said, "A solitary fantasy can transform 1,000,000 realities. Just 3 bold steps can transform one reality, yours." Thank you.
So now that you've watched the video, you've drawn out your future. One of the big things I really love about this video, and definitely look into the presenter's other videos because they tend to expand on it, which is really wonderful, is that they say in 3 bold steps, you can transform one reality, yours. So in these 3 bold steps that you just mapped out, you are able to see it, believe it, and act on it. And so with that, now that you have this image, you have this dream that you've drawn out, I'm going to challenge you to see it, believe it, and act on it. So one big thing from this video that is really cool is that for folks that watched it, so you see 90% of the people that watched the video were inspired to draw the picture. And then from those people that actually drew the picture, 66% of them reported back success in those dreams and drawings that they made. And then 30% found that they were stuck and frustrated and just scared by the whole process. So what's going on there? So when we really start thinking about what's happening with those 66% of people that were able to see it, believe it, and act on it, and then the 30% that were just like, oh my goodness, this is a great picture, but I'm overwhelmed by it. I don't really see it becoming a reality for me right now. What's happening there? And so as you'll see, as you saw in the video, it really came down to those people believing in themselves and believing in that dream. And so, just like I shared earlier with my high school counselor, had I really listened to her and said, okay, yeah, you know, I'll just go down the hill and check out that community college and see what happens because I know I can't make it, that would have been me kind of scratching out my picture and just tossing it aside. But instead I said, you know what? No, I'm gonna see it, believe it, and act on it. And so the big thing for all of this, for all this series, for all this course is you have to believe in your goals. You have to believe in these dreams and really manifest it and call it to you. Because if you're not gonna believe in it, how can you expect other folks to believe in it? So with that, this is the time where you can get a little creative and start making vision boards of your own. And so vision boards come in all different ways. So you see a vision board here, it's just on a dry erase board. They have a lot of text, they have some images, but it's more just different goals that they're trying to accomplish and how they have an action plan for that. Then you see a vision board where it's more of a collage style. They took out different pieces from magazines. They have, you know, a lot of words and things and images that stand out to them, and they know they're working towards that vision. Then you see another person who has kind of a combination. It looks like it's something they have in their planner. Possibly they look at it every day as they're doing their different work. But all of these are great examples of different ways that you can make a vision board of your own. There's no right or wrong way. It's just something that really has a guide for you that you're going to be able to see.
Yeah, I really like this idea that Eliza's talking about, the vision boards, because it's just, it relates all the way back to your goals, you know, talking about it, saying it out loud, you're putting it out there in the universe. And this is something that you could even do with your friends, you know, make it a fun night of like a sleepover or something and do some vision boards. I like to do more of the drawing and stuff like that versus cutting out like collage, but I mean, there's no, like Eliza said, there's no wrong way to do this, and put it somewhere you can see it. Put it, you know, up in your dorm or put it up in your room where you see it every day and you're reminding yourself of the dreams that you want, of the life that you hope to have. And seeing it every day, it's going to make a bigger difference because then you can start taking those steps to move forward towards your goals. And so I think that's really important to visualize it and put it out there.
Yeah, and you don't have to be like Picasso. No, if I did my vision, like I have little vision boards and I like to do the collage style because I don't want to have to try to draw things. I get very like, my perfectionism comes out, but then it still is just a stick figure. Yeah. So I have to go and just like cut out little things, make a collage. But as long as you have something that you are seeing, like Dr. Searle is saying, that's the biggest thing, is that you're seeing it, you're working towards it every day, and you're making that dream happen.
And then just clicking back a little bit, I know Eliza is showing this slide with 3 different types of vision boards. There's this one here that's just even on a plain whiteboard where they wrote goals and the things that they have to do today, goal weight. Even just writing it out and putting it up somewhere you can see it like that is going to make a big difference too. So you don't have to make it super elaborate or anything. Just putting it out there is going to make a big difference.
So by the end of this course, your bedroom or your office space, wherever you are, is going to be decorated. You are going to have your priority list. You're going to have your dream that you just did with the video. You're going to have your vision board, your big rocks. Like, we're just redecorating your space, essentially. But it's going to be manifesting to these spectacular dreams and futures y'all have. So that's the beautiful part. So with that, we are going to start talking about personal brand. What does this even mean? I know, like Dr. Stoll said earlier, when people talk about personal branding, I always think of like the big wigs I see in the movies with their like pantsuits, and they're in these like skyscraper buildings and living in these big cities. And I'm like, okay, they must have a personal brand because they seem very put together, very professional. It overwhelms me when I initially think of personal brand.
It can be intimidating because I know I've had friends and colleagues who've have these really like up-to-date LinkedIn accounts and even like YouTube videos or different, you know, just so much stuff that they put their personal brand out there. And it does get intimidating because I'm like, I just want to help students. Is that enough? So I'm glad that we're going to go into this more.
Yeah, I definitely think that, especially for younger generations, we see so many folks on social media that are seen as influencers. And, you know, for like Tiffany and I, how we are like, well, we want to help students. And no matter what that passion of yours or where you land within that spectrum, your personal brand really comes down to this core thing. So we see this quote here by Dory Clark. Dory Clark is somebody who's been in the Harvard Business Review. They're a very popular and powerful entrepreneur, and they really broke down personal brand very simply. Your personal brand is what other people say about you when you leave the room. It's your professional reputation. So at the core of it, your personal brand is your reputation. What is that impact? What are those first impressions? What are you making on other folks when you leave the room? What are they saying? It's that vision, that passion, that purpose that really is going to shine through in the work you do.
Yeah, I think that's just so powerful. You know, what are you putting out there about yourself? Like Eliza mentioned before, she wants to be a good member to her people and to her ancestors, and I think the same thing. You know, I think about my nieces, and I have so many cousins, younger cousins that I used to take care of, and I think, what do I want them to think of me? I want them to be proud of me and how I represent myself and my work, and so what do you want people to say about you? And essentially that's just what it comes down to.
Definitely. So where to start? This is the big thing is, all right, we are having you explore and reflect and think about what your purpose is. We're having you do some vision boarding and just manifest some of those dreams. Now we're starting to talk about personal brand. So this is all culminating and coming together, but where do you start? So here are some things to consider. Think about what you're very passionate about, what you're really knowledgeable on. That's a really good place to start, because wherever you find that you're very passionate, that tends to be where your energies go. So thinking back to those priorities and those big rocks, what we're going to find is our energies are going to go to those different areas. For me, you know, I said it was, you know, my people, it's helping folks. My energies naturally are going to be drawn to doing that. So why would I try to kind of go a different way when I naturally am trying to work to make that my reality and manifest those dreams?
I definitely think you make it harder trying to do something that you're not knowledgeable or passionate about if you're just really forcing it. I have one cousin who he just really wants to be an engineer, like I think mainly for the money. But he's so good at designing. Like he decorates his family's home, my aunt's home, and he does such a good job. And I told him, why don't you look into going into like design school or something? You know, that's something you're really good at and you really like to do. You know, he comes over and it's like, this would look better here or this would look better there. And I'm like, you don't have to push it just because you want a big paycheck. Do something that you want to do, something that you like to do. So then it's not a job after that.
Exactly. I need to have your cousin come to my house. Like, I do not have that design bone in my body. That's where Pinterest comes into play.
Yeah.
So with that, think about your passion. That's the biggest thing. It's going to come naturally to you. It's going to come easy to you. It's going to just flow. And when you're feeling that flow, that tends to be, you know, I always say the universe is giving me those signs I'm on the right path. So with that, also think about your values. How are you going to share them? How are you going to present them to the world and those around you? This is coming down to that reputation you're going to have. And so in those professional spaces, how are you sticking to those values and those morals you have? And, you know, sticking to your word. For me, that's really important, sticking to my word. For me, it's more of a communal process of rising and not an individual independent process. For me, I definitely am not how you see in the movies and the Wolf on Wall Street, where it's kind of like climbing up this ladder, don't care who I walk on. No, for me, that's my value system, and I hope when I leave the room, folks are not saying, oh, that Liza, like, she just talks all the time and it's just about herself. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But really think about those values you have and how you're conveying that to the world and how your actions are speaking to that too, because that will be huge in that process of really developing and nurturing that reputation you're making.
No, that's very true. I mean, for me growing up, my dad was always so strict on being on time. Like, we were always the family that was there, like, on time, while everybody else kind of like showed up an hour later. And so that's something that I think I bring with me, you know, to the workplace. I like to be on time. I don't want people waiting on me, but that's something I grew up with. That's something that I was told to be on time. So think about the things that your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, uncles, what are some of those values that they instilled in you, and how can you translate that to the workplace?
Exactly. And so this next piece I think is really valuable, is thinking about the experiences you've had and how that contributes to this reputation, to this personal brand that you're developing. And these aren't just going to be those positive gold star moments. These are going to be some of those harder times, those obstacles, those failures. For me, I think failure can be the biggest area of growth for a person. It's those times where I've had to hit rock bottom and really do some soul searching that I've come up, you know, stronger and bigger and just more focused on where I'm trying to go and what I'm trying to do. And so I definitely would say lean into some of those hard times and really do some of that soul searching, because I feel like it's in those moments that you really start to grow. And it's that growth that will help with this personal brand. It's that growth that will help you find those passions. And it's that growth that will help you really understand your purpose and that why. For me, it's always been those mentors and those advisors I have that have those most powerful stories, because they told me about the failures. They told me about hitting rock bottom. They told me about, you know, getting all the gold stars. But it helped me just see them more as human and not this superhero I have in my mind. They're still superhuman, but it just makes it so I can relate to them and be vulnerable with folks too. So I think definitely thinking about your experiences and not just highlighting all the good, but touching on some of that growth you've had can just make your story more powerful.
No, and that's so important, because the times that those, not necessarily negative experiences, but just those times that you maybe tried a job that you didn't really like, now you know you don't like it, right? And so I've had a lot of different jobs. I've worked in retail, I've worked for CPS, I've done a lot of different things, and so those are the times that I realize maybe I don't want to be in retail for a long time. It's really hard. Or even with CPS, I'm like, this is a really hard job. Is this really what I want to do? So having those experiences are really going to help contribute to who you are and figuring out where you want to be. So don't take the bad experiences as just bad. See it as a growth.
Yeah. And so the last question to really consider and ponder is, what do you want to achieve with this brand? So that's really getting at, what do you want that impact to be? What do you want that word to be when you leave the room? What is that purpose that you're really trying to work towards and achieve? Think back to what we did with our goal setting, your priorities. I'm going to keep referencing back to those lists. So make sure you have them posted up somewhere, because that's what we're working towards. And that's what's going to make this personal brand and your reputation even stronger. So with this, now we're going to build on knowing yourself. So you'll see this theme emerging this week is really wanting to get into having you be that most authentic and genuine person you can be, and really having your true inner self shine. And so knowing yourself through this process is going to be key to this success. And so a lot of times we're always saying, you know what, journal, or make lists, or do these vision boards, because those processes will help it so that you really start to understand that purpose, that personal brand.
The reflection.
The reflection. Exactly.
Especially when you are going through these different job pieces and stuff. Journal those experiences, not only so you can remember it, but just so you can help yourself kind of work through the process of whether or not you're going to continue down that path. So.
And so with this is a really good opportunity to pause this and watch this video on personal branding.
Cue video.
The ultimate weapon to landing that dream job, what is it? Is it a perfect GPA? Is it a college degree? Or is it a resume? Perhaps it is a personal brand. Although I can't guarantee you that a personal brand will solve all of these problems, I can, however, promise that when done with intention and purpose, a personal brand will enable you to meet interesting people and unlock disruptive opportunities. Before I dig deeper into the what and how of a personal brand, I'd like to share with you the why and why personal branding matters so much to me. To help illustrate this point, I'd like to share with you a photo. That's me in the center. I was born in Vietnam, where both my parents never attended high school. They were both hard-working street vendors who were selling a popular street snack in Vietnam called the hot buns. If I were to have stayed in Vietnam, I most likely would have followed their footsteps in becoming a street vendor as well. Fortunately, at the age of 6, my parents decided to immigrate to the United States with nothing with them in hope of a better future for me and my brother. Despite the early challenges, such as being a second language learner or assimilating to the American culture, I ultimately, through perseverance and determination, made it to college, where I attended the #1 public university in the world, UC Berkeley. Go Bears! At UC Berkeley, I quickly realized that hard work and staying up all night and a college degree were simply table stakes in today's competitive job market. What I realized is less about what you know, but more about who you know. And during that time, I was enamored by the tech boom within Silicon Valley. I was interested in working for Facebook, Apple, and the Google. But I realized the question that I had to answer was that I had no connection to this world. I didn't have a family friend, a cousin, or an uncle, or a sibling in this industry. I knew nobody. And that's when I turned to personal branding. I realized through personal branding, I was able to position myself as someone who was an enthusiastic, a young millennial marketer who was invested in his development and success. And through that, I met many interesting mentors. Some of these mentors are here today. One of my mentors at Apple, who gave me the opportunity to work for one of the world's most beloved brands. I met my mentor at Forbes, who guided me through my marketing journey, ultimately leading me to becoming one of the youngest Forbes 30 under 30 at the age of 22. Finally, I met many interesting writers and editors at LinkedIn who believed in my story and shared my narrative at scale to a readership of over 100,000 people to millions as well. Now that I've talked to you a little bit more about the why behind the personal brand, let's talk about what is a personal brand. There's a lot of misconception when it comes to personal branding. A lot of people find it very fake. They don't believe that it's real, it's disingenuous, it's not authentic. And many people are afraid that it will do more harm than good. But what if I tell you that a narrative or a personal brand that's not shaped by you will be formed and told by others? Do you want to take that risk? Ultimately, when done with intention and purpose, a personal brand can do more benefits than harm. That being said, I'd like to share with you a concept to help better define what is a personal brand. Sharing you with the concept of voice and tone. Many of us here have a very authentic and unique voice to us. This voice is recognized by our peers, parents, and managers. However, we also have many tones in our life. These tones are the way we interact with many people through different contexts and different purpose. For example, when I speak to my parents, I'm trying to demonstrate respect, while when I speak to my colleagues and manager, I'm trying to demonstrate leadership. Your voice will always stay true to you, but your tone will change over time based on your audience and context and purpose. That being said, what is a personal brand? A personal brand is the intersection of perception and reality, not just perception. For as a personal brand that is constructed purely on perception will tumble on its own weight. So what is a personal brand then, if it's not just perception? It's you. You are at the heart and the epicenter of your personal brand. Your personal brand needs to be led by your voice and ultimately be supported by an interconnected web of personality, passion, and interest. Here, I'm humanizing this whole concept through emojis because I want to let you know that this part is very humanizing. A personal brand doesn't have to be superficial. It doesn't have to be supported by a team of 10 people. It can be supported by you. One thing that you can do at home tonight is think about the 7 emoji that represent you as a professional, but also a person as well. So now that I've covered the why and the what of a personal brand, so how can you incorporate personal branding to your life as well? We're all so different. So I will be lying up on the stage if I tell you that I have the perfect guide to building a personal brand. And I take that back. Not even building. Building assumes that personal branding can be done with step 1, step 2, step 3. But as a matter of fact, personal branding can be done through a designing approach. And today I want to share with you some of those building blocks to help you better design your personal brand. Embraced. Embrace your identity. Embrace your adversity. Embrace your diversity. Embrace your whole self. Only then can people know who you are. Vulnerability is an opportunity. For example, as an immigrant and second language learner, I've always been shameful and fearful that my employers would only hire me if I was a native speaker. However, when I share this information with my manager, with my peers, with my colleagues, they found that I was going to bring a different perspective to the workplace. And so that liability turned into an opportunity. Ultimately, by sharing your backstory, this breathes life to your personal brand, the motivation, the passion behind your career interests. Create. Create value for your audience. Create value for your network. In other words, consume and curate good content, relevant content. Have a reason to speak. In early 2015, I decided to take on LinkedIn to write 1 post a month as a New Year resolution. And by the end of the year, I posted over 30 times. And throughout that time, I was able to interact with many interesting people throughout the world. Some students reached out to me from Denmark saying that my writing has helped inspire them to be a marketer, whereas some writing has helped create conversation at a national level. Over a course of a year, I realized that I have touched over 1 million people through my writing. And so write with the intention to impact. Write with the intention to create value. For only when you create value for others will other people see the value in you. And being able to create value is to position yourself as the top of mind. Think about publishing long-form thought leadership pieces on LinkedIn or Medium or your personal blog. Have a reason to drive dialogue. Position yourself as top of mind in your industry. Don't just farm relationships, grow them. Many people see personal branding as a number game. They think that the more people you know, the better it will be. I believe that it's more about depth rather than width. It's not about how many people you know. It's more about how many people you know and how well you know them as well. Don't be transactional when it comes to outreach. Think about reaching out for people for advice and not for favors. Personal branding is ultimately, at its core, about building your network and your relationship. Online, engage with your mentors, engage with the people that follow you. Think about ways you can add value to them, bringing back to the second principle. Think about ways you can check in with your mentors via email, sharing great quality content, a blog post that you read. And ultimately, offline, attend conferences, dinners, or better yet, host them. I personally host many dinners myself, thinking about the way I can connect with people inside and outside my industry. So don't just think about growing your relationship with people within your industry. Think about ways you can engage with people outside your industry. The way I think about relationship building is through a 50-30-20 approach. 50% of your time should be spent with people who you aspire to be, leaders in your industry. 30% should be spent with time with people who are in your proximity peers, people that are your colleagues, your peers. They're going through their career with you. And 20% of the time should be spent paying it forward to people that look up to you. They're your mentees. And throughout your career, as I hope you mature your career, that this concept can flip over, where 50% of your time can be spent paying it forward. So to recap, there are no such thing as a manual to building a personal guide. A personal branding is mainly the idea, the representation of the best of you, your flaws, your triumph, your challenges, but also your successes as well. Today, I've shared with you the why, the what, and the how to personal branding. I took on the stage of TEDx to embrace my identity, a part of me that I've rarely shared with many people. Ultimately, I was able to share my value through my personal branding experience, my background with you, and I hope that's added value to your life as well. And beyond this talk, I'm looking forward to growing and cultivating our relationship in person and online as well through the various social media channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, and follow me on Twitter as well. And that's my personal branding, I'm just kidding. Yes, and so at the end of the day, I want to share with you some of these principles so you can do this, and it doesn't have to take 10 people to manage your personal brand. You can do it yourself as well. So to conclude, this is a transformation of the son of 2 hot bun street vendors from Vietnam, from an immigrant from a disadvantaged background to a storyteller and entrepreneur in Silicon Valley today. And this is what I call the designing of a purposeful personal branding from 0 to infinity.
So now that you've watched the video, one thing I really love about this video is that you hear about Thai Tran's experience. And so the quote I took from the video that I really like in regards to personal brand is when they say personal brand is the intersection of perception and reality. Not just perception, where a personal brand is purely based on perception will tumble on its own weight. A personal brand is you. You are at the heart of a personal brand. Your personal brand needs to be led by your voice. So for me, this is so powerful. We really want you to take away knowing yourself and having your personal brand, your reputation, at the core of it be led by your voice, your story, and your purpose. So with this, we're really trying to emphasize knowing yourself, doing that reflection, doing that self-exploration, and really getting into that core of who you are so that your voice shines through. The other piece on this that I wanted to address is when done with intention and purpose, a personal brand will open up many opportunities. And so that's what we also are hoping. On this journey, as you're manifesting these different things in your life, you're going to see many opportunities open up. And similarly, if you're not on that path that is really driven by your passion, or maybe it's, your passion is design, but you're thinking engineering, you can go explore that, but you might be drawn back to these other places. And so when you see some of those doors closing, maybe it's time to reevaluate and reshift and see, okay, where could my other passions lie? Where could other places in the universe be trying to direct me to?
And that's okay.
Yes. So the other things I really loved about this video is Mr. Tran talks about keys to success. And so some of these keys to success are embracing your identity. So embracing your whole self, embracing adversities, embracing diversity, not just thinking that some of these pieces, be it your culture, your background, whatever it is that's part of your story, is seen as less than, but really embracing it and having that be your superpower, having that be what's going to set you apart from other folks.
I completely agree with that, because a lot of times I think students tend to try and put, I guess, their best foot forward. Is that the expression, the right expression? And tend to leave back, some of the negative stuff because they don't want to seem weak, or they don't want to seem like this particular thing in their life has, they don't want it to define them, but it is your whole self. And that's something that I've also had to learn to talk about more. One of those things being, I lost my mom when I was 12 years old. And instead of thinking that as all negative, I feel like it has made me so much stronger because I've had to really grow up from that. And so don't be afraid to talk about those things, because it is who you are and you don't want to hide that.
Exactly. So those things can become your strengths. They can become your superpowers. You don't have to fit into this cookie cutter mold. I say break the cookie, make your own, and whether it comes out as a star, a circle, a unicorn, I would say mine would be a unicorn, then you're good. Be your whole self. That is the big point. So the other key to success is create value in your work. So this is really getting at, knowing your passion, knowing that purpose, and being proud of what you're putting out there, and really having it connect with those bigger picture goals that you have in mind too. I feel like when we are proud of our work, it's going to come through and it's going to shine. And so the last key is growing relationships. So I know, like I said earlier, when I thought of personal branding, all I saw was kind of these top dogs, networking, talking, very business style. But I really love about this video is how they emphasized that you need to have very deep relationships, not just superficial level, but actually have taken time to build those relationships where it could be with mentors or supervisors or peers or colleagues, where when you leave the room, they're going to say, you know what? Dang, that Tiffany, she is just always on time. She is just a fabulous steward to her culture and her people, like all this great stuff. And so with that, I thought it was really just powerful to see someone say to invest in those relationships. And even here, you'll see how they broke down in the video where you can invest your time. Because like I said earlier, what you're passionate about, what you're really working towards is where a lot of your time and energies are going to go. So I thought this was a cool equation where they say 50% of your time should be spent around people you're aspiring to be.
That's true. Well, I was just going to say my brother, he tended to hang out with a lot of people from, the past, the childhood, and I told him, brother, if you surround yourself from people just in your past, that's where you're going to be. You're going to stay in your past. You want to surround yourself with people who you want for your future. You want to surround yourself by what you want in your future. So think about your goals, what do you want, and surround yourself with that. So that's what you want to do. So the people you surround yourself is where you're going to be.
Yeah, exactly. So that might be, those future engineers or those future designers or the mentors you have in your life, your supervisors, wherever you see yourself, be in those circles, talk with those people, build those relationships. So that's where 50% of your time. So 30% is really spent with your peers and colleagues. So building those relationships with one another. I feel like that's really where some of that, when you leave the room, what are folks going to say? It's going to be these people, because you really are going to be around them a lot. And, I can tell you, I know Dr. Sorrell very well. We went through her PhD program together. We worked together. I consider her one of my very close friends. And so I really have invested time into this relationship. And so thinking about who you're putting those time and energies into can also be a reflection of who you have. So if folks were like, oh, Eliza, why are you hanging out with XYZ? They're not really on that path to help you manifest that beautiful future you have ahead of you. And then they see me hanging out with Dr. Sorrell, they're like, oh, I see what you're doing. Like, you're on that path. And so really being cognizant of who you have in your circle and making sure those people are there to cheer you on and build you up and not hold you back. So then 20% of the time is really going to be looking at how you can pay it forward. And again, these percentages, you don't have to have them be that exact, but I love that this last piece is really how you're going to pay it forward. Thinking about people who are coming after you, those next generations. I'm big on thinking about those generations that are going to follow, and what am I doing to make it so this path is better, wider, greater for folks that are coming after me.
It's just like some of our colleagues and peers within our PhD program sometimes reach out and, how did you do this, or how did you do that, or what's the process for this, what's the process for that? And so I don't mind at all being like, this is what I did, here's my draft, this is the route I took, because we want to be able to lift each other up and help each other in that way. So
all right, y'all, so now we're going to shift gears a little. This is all connecting. So we've identified your priorities last week, we've identified some of these goals. Now we're having you think about your purpose. We're having you think about that reputation you're building. And now it's all culminated and you're sitting in this office at an interview. And the magical question comes up. You're going to get a lot of questions, but almost always that first question is going to be, tell me about yourself. Or tell me about yourself and why you feel like you're a good fit for this position. And so a million things start racing in your mind. You're like, oh my goodness. I think, I could give you a million bad examples of what I've done before. But actually what Dr. Sorrell and I are going to do is run through an example of tell me about yourself. So
this is going to be the what not to do.
Acting hats on. All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Sorrell. I'm so happy you're here today. Can you please tell me about yourself and why you feel fit for this position?
Thank you. Yat a she Tiffany Sorrell Unishia Tapahan Nishle Kinsachini Bashish Chin my dash Gishni Dashache do Heglini Dashanele. So my name's Tiffany and I am from the Diné tribe. I just introduced myself in my 4 clans. That's where I consider myself to come from, is the 4 different clans that I just presented. And my first clan, Tapahan, means water runs through it. And so I've always been told by my grandparents and my uncle that Tapahan clan means that you are a grower. So things that you are involved with grow.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
So
that's all I said.
from that, as you know, the employer, I wouldn't understand why she's fit for this position. I would say, okay, you know, she has a really strong cultural foundation. That's definitely one of her superpowers. But I would also leave having notes of, I don't know why she's fit for this position.
And that is something I really said in an interview. And I didn't explain, you know, some of the things that I helped grow or some of the things that I did that improved or anything like that. That was it. And then it was the next question, and I didn't get that job.
So really be thinking about this. So big things with this tell me about yourself question is that employer is wanting to see these core points. So they're wanting to know you did your research on that position, that you read that job description front and back, you went through it and said, I am qualified for this position because of X, Y, Z. And the big thing I always like to look for when I am interviewing people is that they have examples to support why they feel like they're qualified for that position. So it's not just, oh, I'm very studious and I am great at public speaking. No, I want to hear about a time where you had to do public speaking and how it was very successful and what came about from that experience. So that's one thing this tell me about yourself question is seeking out. Specifically, why are you fit for this position and not telling me what your favorite color is, not just keeping it very to the point, these are my clans, but really what is it that's going to make you a good fit and what experience do you have that you're bringing to this position?
And it's not that you can't include your cultural values. You can. I mean, it was fine that I introduced myself in that way, but what you need to do is take it further and explain, like Dr. Yellowbird said, your examples of these things that you grew or whatever, you know. So practice. It's going to be so important that you practice this as much as you can, even if it's just at home with, you know, grandma and grandpa. Just do a practice run.
Yes, I agree. The more practice you can, be it, you know, the person on the bus, your best friend, your baby mama, whoever you can practice this with, practice. Like, just go on Google, come up with some of the list of questions and practice and rehearse them. Because trust you and me, when you're in that position and you're being interviewed, those nerves are going to kick in. Like we talked about last time, that panic monster, he likes to kind of jump in there too and just start talking. I know for me, an example where I was a hot mess in an interview is they said, tell me about yourself. And I started, and this is pretty common that people tend to fall into, I started just regurgitating my resume. I started saying, I have done, you know, I started as a GA in higher education. I did this in South Dakota, and then I moved to Arizona, and I did this in this position, and then I was a research position, and I did this, and then I came here, and then I went there, and then I came here. And they have read that. They saw my resume. They saw my application. They want to see specifically, why am I applying for this position and how my experiences qualify me for this position. So practice is key. Coming up with these experiences are key. I really love the STAR method here. So thinking about skill sets you have. So public speaking, you know, writing, if you feel like you're very entrepreneurial, if you have graphic design skills, whatever your skill sets are, make sure that you have specific examples You want to be able to share what happened from that example, and you want to be able to share how that skill set was successful and what came from that. So I could say, I feel like I am fairly good. I'm not going to say 100%, but I'm fairly good at public speaking. You know, I've been teaching, I do workshops, I do different presentations, and then I had this really amazing co-lead opportunity come where I got to do a recorded session with folks that was going to be shared, you know, across the state, potentially nationally. And it was a really successful program where we were able to give information to people on career readiness. And so I could go on and tell them more about that, but that's a very specific example of public speaking that I could share potentially in the future. So those are the things that we're wanting you to be very clear on. Here is an example that we'll share in this next video about how to answer this question correctly and some of those pitfalls that some people fall into when answering this question.
And before you cue the video, the other thing that I wanted to mention too is also to have your own questions prepared. So have your own questions prepared when you go into an interview. You won't always want to ask a question at the end. Whether it be, can you tell me more about the tasks that I will have to complete in this position, or can you tell me what a day in this work environment is like? Ask something. So don't just say thank you, have a good day. Try to be more engaging and ask questions too.
That would be a red flag if I was your employer and say, wow, they have no questions for me. Like, okay. So that would be kind of an X on my sheet. Watch this section, and it's going to give you tips and tricks on how to really ace this question of tell me about yourself and how do you qualify for this position.
Cue video.
It is a safe bet this will be one of the first questions you will face, and the way you answer it will set the tone for the entire interview. One thing that stays true for this answer every time you are asked: keep it professional. Employers are not asking you this question because they want to know what your favorite color is. They want to know why you are the best candidate for the job. Employers want to hire the best person for the job, and your job is to convince them this is you. As it is most likely the first question you will face in your interview, it is one of the first impressions you will be giving the employer. You want to give the most professional image of yourself as possible. In order to accomplish this, do not volunteer personal information.
Please tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm 23 years old, I was born and raised in this city, I have 2 dogs, and I love basketball.
This candidate has already set himself back. You don't want to give any information about your personal life, but rather your professional life and how it relates to the position you are interviewing for. To do this successfully, you need to prepare and structure your answer highlighting your relevant education, experience, and professional qualities. From the job description, you know what the qualifications for the job are and what skills the employer is looking for. So you want to highlight all of the previous work experience, education, training, and all other professional skills that are relevant to the position. No matter what your work history is, you have transferable skills. If this is your first job in your field, then highlight the skills and training you received from your education as they pertain to the job, and talk about any transferable skills you might have gained from any of your work experience. Highlight your accomplishments as well. If you've received any academic awards or any promotions or commendations from your job, feel free to mention it. Not every position you interview for is going to be exactly the same, even if the job title is. Each company has different needs, so study the job description and figure out exactly what it is they're looking for. Once you figure out what the employer is looking for in a candidate, your job is to be that person. So emphasize the skills and qualifications you have that relate to the job specifically. Try to keep your answers in chronological order. You do not have to recap your professional history year by year, but detailing the experiences and skills that you have gained as you attain them in an organized fashion will leave a good impression on the employer. Your resume can help you with this, as it is in chronological order, and can help you set a timeline. Now that you have the structure, here is a good example.
Please tell me about yourself.
Let's see. I believe I have a very solid background in medical assisting. I earned my degree in medical assisting where I learned valuable skills such as taking vitals, administering injections, explaining treatment procedures to patients, preparing patients for examination, and assisting the physician with examinations. While earning my degree, I worked in customer service at ABC Pharmacy for 3 years as well, where I gained valuable communication skills and learned how to address customers' needs, which enables me to relate and effectively communicate with patients and their needs. I also completed an internship at a health clinic while in school, where I picked up more valuable skills, including updating patient files and medical records, handling correspondence, scheduling appointments, arranging for hospital admission, and help make sure the office ran smoothly. These are all valuable skills which I will hopefully be able to apply to this position and bring to your office.
Remember, when answering the question, tell me about yourself. Keep it professional and do not give any personal information. Highlight your skills from your relevant education and training that will help you in the position. Tell them your work history and transferable skills as it relates to the job you are interviewing for, and do so in an organized, chronological fashion.
So now that you know more about the tell me about yourself and why you fit for this position through this video you just watched, we do really want to emphasize that this is an important and a significant question to have practiced and to really be prepared for. This will really show that future employer of yours that you've done your research on that position, that you do have a concise path for answering this question that is showing how you really stand out for this position, and that you have done your research and looked into what is going to be required for this position. You know, it's not just looking at the job description, but it is having those questions prepared, like Dr. Sorrell said. Have you gone on that website and looked into the company? Have you gone and see if they have more materials? Have you really gone in and had those questions prepared for when you do get to that point in the interview? Because I know, like I said earlier, if people just say, oh, I don't have any questions, or you've answered everything for me, that's really a red flag for me. I'm going to say, wow, okay, like I took this time out of our busy schedules to meet with you, to sit down with you, and you didn't have any questions for me.
And then you also want to get a vision of what the position is going to be like, and that's really where this having your own questions come into play, because then you can really dive into more detail. What does the day look like in this position? You know, what are the tasks that are going to be expected of me, and things like that. So it's helping you as well, not just the employer, but it's helping you to kind of figure out if this is the right fit for you. So
yeah, and I'm always very impressed when I have somebody come in and they say, well, I saw on your website that you do XYZ programming. Or, wow, I saw that you have a transition program here as a part of a grant that you've been doing. Can you tell me more about that? Like, that's always gold stars across the board for me, because I see that they actually took the time, they looked into it, and they have those different questions prepared. Or they even ask me something very specific, like, I see in your office you have a high school program for, you know, underrepresented students. Can you tell me more about that? That wouldn't have been on the job description. That's telling me 100% that that person went and really looked at our website very detailed and very closely. So that's a big part of this interview process. And we're about to transition now into the strengths and areas of growth. I don't want to say weaknesses, strengths and areas of growth. So these are going to be very popular questions. And so these two links on this screen will actually take you to places that will give you tips on how to answer the areas of strengths that you have, and then tips on how to answer areas of growth. So when it comes to strengths, you want to have it be very relevant and focused to that position. You don't want to pull an Eliza and a baby Eliza. Let's call her baby Eliza, where you just give your whole resume and your whole life history, and you say, when I was in high school, I did this. And no, you want to be very specific on your strengths and have it be tailored to whatever that position is asking. So you don't want to go into, I've seen so many applications where currently we're working in the health sciences, and people are telling me their strengths that they've had within business or science or you know, something that's completely different from what I'm talking about within health sciences. And so given if you have strengths in other areas, that's good, but you need to be able to tie it back into what that job is asking. So be very specific and very strategic about how you address those strengths, and make sure that employer knows that you're thinking about how whatever you're bringing to the table is going to fit within that position that they're asking of you.
Yeah, and just because it's not super in the field, as long as you can translate those strengths into that position that you're applying for, you're going to be set. Because like I said, I've done all kinds of jobs. Like I said, I did retail, and I've worked with CPS, and some of the strengths that I gained from retail was customer service. And so that's something I can translate to my position now as a learning specialist. Am I providing good customer service to our students? And then same thing with CPS. That was a very intense job where I've had people yell at me on the phone and in person and all kinds of stuff like that. So being able to handle in high intense situations is also a strength that I can translate to this position. So just because it's not within the field, as long as you're able to relate it to the job you have now, then you're on the right track.
Exactly. I 100% agree with that. It really comes back to being able to show what you're bringing to the table, and then also highlighting what makes you unique and special for that position. You know, folks, employers have a lot of resumes, a lot of applications they're reviewing, and so you want to make sure your story is coming through. You want to make sure you're very specific in what your strengths and your superpowers are. You want to have that purpose come through. You want to have that personal brand and reputation that you have developed over this path really shine through when you talk about those strengths. And on the flip side of that, there's always that question where your employer is going to ask you, what weaknesses do you have, or what areas of growth do you have, or what opportunities do you want to develop professionally? And so you don't want to be that diva lady walking in there saying, you know what, honey, I don't have any areas of growth. I'm 100%. Like, you take me or you leave me. No, that's going to be a big red flag, a big X. I always say with this question, sometimes for some of us, you can think of a million things that you're like, oh, I don't have this and I don't have that and I need to work on this. But you want to be able to come across polished and professional, especially in these interview settings. So really being able to take an area of growth that you might have and translate it. So for me, I always would talk about how I want to build more professional development. So I want to have more opportunities where I would be able to work with grants. When I started in my current position, I didn't have that much grant writing experience. And so I was very upfront about that with my employers, where I said, you know what, grant writing is one area of growth that I definitely need to develop, but I hope to seek that out in this position. So it's really being able to address and identify an area that you might not be as strong in, but then turning it around and connecting it to what you want to develop within that position, especially since you read that job description and you know that's something that they are looking for. And it tells that employer that, you know, hey, there's things that they can develop over time through this position within this program, this office, this company, etc.
Yeah, you're never going to be completely perfect when you go into these new positions and these new situations, and so just being it goes back to your goal setting again too. Where do you want to see yourself? What do you want to gain from this experience? When I came into this job, I didn't know a whole lot about the MCAT or like the medical school process, but I know it now. So so you want it for yourself too. You want to be able to grow and develop and then possibly move up. And so if you come into a job and you're just saying, I don't have anything to develop, then there's not going to be anything. There's not going to be anywhere for you to grow. There's not going to be anywhere for you to go. So you do want to put that out there and put it out in the universe, just like we've been saying with all of our goals, with all of our goal settings.
And definitely, you know, turn those negatives into positives. You don't want to give them a long list of reasons of areas that you need to grow in and you need to work on, and really try to be very specific and tailored to, hey, this is one area I want to grow in, and I think through this position I could really grow in it. So really make it be a positive in the sense that you're telling them that you're going to work on this, that you feel like this position would really help you grow on that. And like Dr. Searle is saying, emphasize how it's going to connect with those long-term goals and those bigger pictures too, because those employers are going to be wanting to see that you do have, you know, that tenacity and that perseverance to really put the work in to make sure you're getting to those areas you want to be at. So with this, now we are going to challenge y'all to come and identify skill sets you have. So you have two options here. Get out your piece of paper and we want you to draw out your hand, or you can draw out a flower, up to you. And what we're going to have you do is on the fingers or the petals, write different skills and qualities that you have. So go through and say, you know, I like public speaking, or, you know, I'm very tenacious, whatever skill sets you have, put those down. Whatever qualities you have, put those down. Then we're going to have you pick a word. So look at all the words you've developed and gathered. Pick one, describe it, and give an example for it. There is a method to our madness. So describe it, put an example to it, and then emphasize how this is a strength. Then what you're going to do is go and summarize about it. You are going to put it into one sentence. So over time, I want you to keep working on this. Keep developing this. You're going to have this beautiful flower blossom. It is going to have all these wonderful petals that you're going to have full of all your skill sets and your qualities. And you're going to be able to pick a petal before an interview and say, I am great at graphic design. I did graphic design for 4 years all through my undergrad. I have had, you know, XYZ publications, whatever it might be. And that's going to be an exercise for you to really start identifying what those skill sets are, identifying what those qualities are, and really starting to make it so that you are able to just naturally glean those from your memory. Because I know for some of us, it becomes hard to have to think about, wow, why are my skills? What are my qualities? Like, you know, some of us are just a little more timid, or, you know, it's harder to think about things that you might have to be more boastful, or, you know, this is really tapping into that confidence and having you have some of those tools to really utilize when it comes to these interview sessions.
Yeah, I really like this activity because I know for myself, it's really hard to talk about myself, or like, you know, kind of boast a little. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I feel a little bit like uneasy about it. But I think this is really good because you're able to write it out and work through it versus just trying to say the words. So the journaling piece comes back in here, where write about those skills and write about those qualities, get it on paper so that way it's out there and you can start learning it and start learning to speak it out loud. And it'll be that much easier when you go into an interview having practiced that already and already having a little tool set of stuff that you can pull from and say, oh, I have these 2 skills, I have these 2 qualities that I had already worked on. So
exactly. So you're going to walk into your interviews and just throw your petals everywhere and be like, I have arrived. Here are all my strengths, all my qualities, all my skills. Like, let's do this. So with that, you are in these interviews, you're applying everywhere under the sun, you're manifesting your dreams, you're making your purpose, all of it's coming together. You got to put it on paper. You have to develop your resume or your CV. But what this is really going to culminate in is needing to have all of these different things that we've covered and put it on, you know, 1 to 1.5 page sheet of paper. This could be very challenging for some folks. So go back to your flower, go back to that purpose, go back to, you know, your vision boards, and look at some of those jobs that you're interested in and start tailoring and designing your resume to fit those positions.
And it's really important to, even as you are looking at those job descriptions and stuff, highlight, you know, some of the skills that they are requiring. And once you're highlighting it, you can start to see, you know, what skills you have and what skills you need to develop. But mostly for your resume, oh, I've done this before, and that's stuff that you can put on your resume. And I know it can be challenging if you're a high school student, that you might not have a bunch of experience, but again, it's how you can translate those experiences.
Exactly. So like Dr. Sorrell was saying, it's about the translation. So I know when I was in high school, I have a bunch of siblings. So I'm the eldest girl. It's kind of like you're the second mom. So I was always in mama role. So I'd have my friends and, you know, peers going off to summer camps and doing all this cool stuff. Given I did get to go to some summer camps, but the majority of the time it was watching babies. And so I kept, when I had to start making my own resume, I was like, well, what am I going to say? I'm a babysitter. Like, yes, that's good, but it doesn't translate as well as childcare provider. So I put on my resume, I was a childcare provider. Or times I would go help my grandparents. You know, I didn't want to say, you know, sat with grandma and grandpa. Like, you know, that's amazing. I learned a lot, but I put, you know, what did I put? Help the elders, things like that. It's all about translation. And so if you are having a harder time figuring out what that translation would be, sit down with some of your mentors, with your advisors, and just pick their brain. You know, go and say, you know, this is what I ended up having to do this summer. How can we really make this translating into something more professional I can put on my resume?
Yeah.
And really making that applicable. So that's for especially folks that are transitioning from high school into college.
And you can even use stuff like a ceremony. You know, my niece went through one that was a very tough ceremony. It was 4 days long, and there's all of these different things that she had to do for it. So as long as she's able to translate, you know, all of the stuff that she learned from that experience, that is something that she could also put on her resume. And I believe Eliza also did some ceremonial dancing.
Yeah, so I know on my resume, I always have under, I think it's like the interests and skill set section. So for Muskogee, we do different ceremonies. So I'll put that I'm a shell shaker, I'm a fancy shawl dancer. I put some of those different pieces on there because those are culturally significant to me. And also, like Dr. Sorrell was saying, something that's very powerful and significant for us, you know, when it comes to different ceremonies. So you definitely can make this resume be your own, but the big thing when you're starting to develop this, especially for folks that are going to be in college or just returning to that professional world, is making sure you're tailoring this resume to those different applications. So let's say you do have, you know, college experience, or, you know, you have been out in the workforce before and now you're having to tailor your resume. Go back and reflect on what was in that job description and what experience do you have that will be applicable to that. Because a lot of times some employers are asking just for a resume and not a CV. The CV is more extensive, in-depth version of your resume, because they are going to be reviewing so many applications. And so having a resume that's very concise and to the point will be most beneficial. I know I've been on some search committees and I've had to read hundreds of resumes. And we would have some folks slip in a CV in there and I wouldn't read past the first page because it was just, it would be like a 15-page CV and it was just too extensive. So be very to the point and specific when you're starting to design these resumes so that they are tailored to those positions.
Yeah, and we've been actually looking for a student admin and looking through some resumes. If it's not formatted in a very organized or structured way, it's hard to get through. And that's one that I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to read this because I don't even know what's going on. So have someone look over it, proofread, and don't be afraid to reach out to family, teachers, friends, and say, hey, can you take a look at this and tell me what you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. I know my big thing is, for most folks, we have access to Google. We have access to mentors. We have access to advisors. So if you're sending me a resume that just has your name at the top and a bunch of bullet points of kind of random information, that's already a red flag for me, because it shows me as an applicant that you didn't really put in that time to develop and create that resume. And I feel like that would potentially be a reflection on how you would be as a future employee. And so like Dr. Sorrell was saying, if it's hard to get through that resume and it doesn't really look like you took the time to have people proofread it, or you took the time to have, you know, some of that structure and formatting in place, for me as a, future somebody who's looking at applications, that would be a red flag for me, and I'd put an X through that. So the other big tip for your resumes is, now you have this fabulous resume, you're able to tailor it to your positions, you have all these different components on there that's going to make you be the star applicant. Big thing is keeping your resume up to date. You are going to come into situations, especially as you're manifesting this future and you're putting all this energy into what you love, where you're going to meet future employers. These opportunities are going to open up to you. I literally have been at different conferences or at different events where somebody would say, can I have your card? Can you send me your resume? And I would have it saved on Google. I had been keeping it up to date. So I'd get back to my room or wherever in my office, and I'd send it off to them. But if you aren't keeping your resume or your CV up to date, then that makes it a little more cumbersome, because you're going to have to go through and update and update and update it. And that can take time depending on how dated it is.
And it gets hard to remember, just everything that you've done and all of the experiences that you've had. For me, I'm not as on top of it as Dr. Yellowbird here, but I do take notes. That's something that I do to keep up with my resume, is if there's something new that I'm learning or something new that I did, I have a little note on my phone that I'll kind of just type it out. Journaling is another good way to kind of keep up with all of this as well, so you can just remember some of those experiences, some of those days that you had.
So with this, now let's actually talk about some do's and don'ts. We've covered a lot of this, and then we're going to get into examples of what resumes look like. So do's and don'ts, like we've been saying, stick to a page, maybe a page and a half if you can't really fit it all into that page. Keep it in chronological order, so your most recent activities first. Use bullet points, action words. Make sure your formatting and your structure is very professional. I always say Times New Roman, something that's not going to be like cursive, or like, I think there's like a comic font that I've seen students use before. Don't use that one. And then I'm always kind of have a hit and miss. I've seen a lot of students start putting images and using different structured formats for your resume. I think the big thing when you are developing your resume and you are using potentially different structuring formats that's not in kind of that typical list format, is make sure that your future employer doesn't have to search for things. So what I mean is, I've had students where they'll have their sheet and they'll have their picture in the center of the sheet, and then it's kind of like a spiral process where you go around. And for me, that was just a little bit too much. I kind of had to search, okay, where's their education? Where's their experience? What is their skill sets? So just make sure that it is visually appealing, and that's where that proofreading part comes in, where you get feedback from your mentors, your advisors, or other folks.
Yeah, and it depends on the job that you're applying for. If you're applying for maybe graphic design, maybe that's a position that you would want to use that resume. I'm not too sure. But if it's for architecture or something in that field, you might want to add some of that in there. But for the most part, just play it safe and keep it simple.
I agree. And then do not. So there's been actually kind of a shift in resume regime. So previously, folks would always say, put your address, put your number, put your email, all of it. So a lot of resumes are now shifting away from actually having your mailing address and just having it be your email, your phone number, your LinkedIn, whatever, if you have a website, that's really good. So you don't have to put your full address. That potentially might save you some space if you're having to put a lot on your resume. Avoid lengthy sentences. Don't have it be multiple pages. Like we said, no messy formats or lack of formatting. And then always, always, always proofread it. That is the biggest tip I think we can have is, I literally have had a resume where I think they may have submitted the wrong one. It had the footnotes, like comments from their mentors or somebody in it. And I was like, oh no. So please proofread it. And this is really a document that's going to have you shine. This is going to be your building block to potentially get you to those interviews we were discussing earlier. So with that, here are examples. So you have an example of a heading. So like I was saying earlier, you want to be able to have your LinkedIn, your website, email, phone number, somewhere that folks can follow up with you. That is the point of this heading, is you need those future employers to be able to get a hold of you to say, you are a shining star, you must have went through that co-lead presentation, like, I love you. Come here, we need to get you in here to have an interview. So make sure you have your contact information up there.
And then another thing to remember is if you're going to put your LinkedIn on, make sure your LinkedIn's up to date. Make sure that is looking good. I don't have anything on my LinkedIn right now, so I would not put that on my resume, because if they go there, they're not going to see anything. So,
and the other thing too, like LinkedIn, make sure that's up to date. A lot of employers, whether they tell you or not, they're going to Google you. And so if they Google you and all your social media profiles come up, you want to make sure whatever you're having on social media is appropriate for future employers to see. And so that's to your discretion, but just make sure that you're aware. People do Google. So you want to make sure whatever you do have out there on the internet is something that you wouldn't be nervous about future employers seeing, which goes back to our personal branding. You want to make sure you're putting that best reputation out there for you. So additional aspects on your resume is going to be education. This is also a place where you can put honors, especially if you're in high school or college. This is going to be a very appropriate place for you to have like a GPA, if you have any kind of national recognitions, things like that. I know when I would be doing my resume, when I was in my undergraduate career, I put that I was a Gates Millennium Scholar. That was something that was very substantial and that I was very proud of, that I wanted future employers and people looking at my resume to be aware of. And so this is an area where folks are going to be looking at your education. If you've been getting honors each semester, that's always a really great thing to put on there. Depending on what your GPA is, you can put that on there. Always make sure you put when you're going to be graduating, because that's important. If you already have graduated, put the graduation date, things like that. So experience. So this is always a part, like we said, have it be chronological. So the most recent will be first.
reverse
chronological. Thanks. Because you want the most recent experience to be first. And this is also where you're going to tailor it to the job. You want to make sure that, like Dr. Sorrell was saying earlier, she has extensive amount of experience in many different areas. So she's going to be able to tailor her resume to be able to highlight the experience that she has in whatever position she's applying for. So you want to put that. I know for some college students it sometimes might be a little challenging, but if you do have the opportunity, especially for folks that are returning to the workforce, really make sure that you are tailoring that, because sometimes I know when I have people who have been in the workforce previously and they do submit an application, you can tell when you haven't really had it tailored to that position. So that's just something to kind of take into note as well.
Yeah, so for example, this one that we have up here is talking about the History Museum. So there might have been a lot of different roles that you've done within that position, but make sure that when you are looking at the job that you're applying to, look at the requirements they have and see if there's anything that match. And that's what you want to put on your resume, are the things that are related to that job. So although maybe you have managing, right here it says manage social media, maybe that's not an important role of this other position. So really think back about all the stuff that you've done there and what you want to put on the position. So you could, you could submit this and not be tailored, but it's not really going to get at what they're looking for. So
yeah, be intentional about those bullet points. Is the big point there, is just to be intentional. This could be somebody who potentially isn't applying for a history position that would be within a history museum experience, but I would see from this, wow, they have experience with social media, they have experience with marketing, they have experience,
advertising.
with advertising, and they have experience working with visitors and folks coming through. Because they were very intentional about those bullet points, as an employer, that's what I'm taking from this job experience. So that's where you can be very intentional, and even if it's not in that same field, you can still tailor it to what that employer is looking for. So activities and skills. So this is where Dr. Sorrell and I was talking about earlier. This is actually where I'll put under skills some of those cultural pieces that I have, because I feel like that's very significant. But it's also an opportunity where you can put volunteer work, you can put different skill sets you have, be it, software skills, it could be, public speaking or graphic design.
It could be your athletics, your band, your art, all of those things that you like to do.
Yeah, so definitely list out, especially if you have familiarity. You can see here this person has familiarity with social media. They put Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. A lot of times, since we are moving more in a tech-savvy direction, it's important to put what platforms you're familiar with, especially if you're familiar with like different Adobe platforms or some very specific software, because that will be a benefit for future employers to be aware of. So now that we've covered your tips for resume, your tips for interviews, and we've talked about your branding, your purpose, your why, this is all culminating into an elevator speech type pitch. So like I said earlier, you want to have your resume up to date because you never know when you're going to run into future employers. When you run into a future employer, you also want to have an elevator speech, which essentially is just a very quick, precise blurb about yourself that's to the point, highlighting your strengths, highlighting your skill sets, and letting people know what those future dreams are that you're manifesting. So with this is an opportunity for you to watch this next video on elevator speeches and how to get some tips on developing these speeches so that you can be successful when you do meet future employers.
Cue video.
How to perfect the elevator pitch. If you happen to run into your ideal employer or business partner in an elevator, or anywhere else for that matter, you'll have about 30 seconds or less to wow them. Here's how to do it. You will need skills or ideas, a list of descriptive phrases, a description of your qualifications, and practice. Optional, a mirror. Step 1. Brainstorm a list of phrases that describe you, and cross off any cliches or catchphrases. Keep only the most unique and honest statements. Step 2. Craft a description of qualifications that you can share in 30 seconds or less. Write the pitch like you speak. This will make it easier to deliver and make it sound more authentic. Step 3. Practice your pitch on friends and family. Ask for feedback and adjust your pitch. It will become natural by doing it over and over. Use a mirror to pitch yourself. If you can't look yourself in the eye, how can you engage someone else? Step 4. Make your pitch about the needs of your listener. Talk about the problems facing their industry that you are uniquely positioned to solve. Step 5. Describe your value in solving these problems. Step 6. Allow room for dialogue. Most people don't like to be talked at, so be conversational and show an interest in them. Step 7. Ask for something, a business card, a phone call, or permission to send your resume. The point of your pitch is to break the ice and generate interest, but you need to ask for the next step. Did you know, as of 2009, the Taipei Financial Center in Taiwan featured the world's fastest elevator, running at a top speed of 39 miles per hour.
So now that you were able to watch the video, you saw some tips on how to develop your elevator speech. This is where all of what we have covered is coming together. So in this elevator speech, as you just saw, you want to be able to introduce yourself, you want to be able to be precise, have it be simple, and have it be organized. You don't want to regurgitate your whole resume like we had said earlier. You don't want to get stuck on just one piece. It needs to be very quick. Ideally, your elevator speech would be a minute or less, because it might just be that quick of an instance where you are meeting a future employer and you only have those few moments to share about what your passions are, what your why is, and highlight some of your strengths.
Yeah, and it's going to be important, again, like we've been mentioning through this whole thing, to practice, because like Dr. Yellowbird said, at any time you could run into an opportunity, and it might not be at a conference, it could be at a tailgate. You know, I've been to tailgates where I've talked to people and they ask, who are you, or what do you do? And then it turns into, well, I work in this area and I'm also in health science, and you know, maybe we can collaborate or things like that. So being able to have that little speech ready to go is going to be really helpful, and it's going to create some open doors for you. So.
And you'll see here there's additional links that you can look into for elevator speeches. There are academic elevator speeches. These will be really tailored to potential research you're working on, really tailored to what those future next steps you are having are. Whereas a professional elevator speech is really going to be tailored to what those overall goals that we talked about last time are and what some of those strengths you have professionally are. So definitely keep that in mind. If you are in college, you will probably want to have both of those elevator speeches available to you when you do meet people, like Tiffany said, that you might meet at tailgates, you might meet at the coffee shop. You definitely can meet people everywhere. So definitely practice and have those different tools available to you. All right, so to come back and highlight what we covered today, the big thing that I think we got across today, our major theme was to know who you are, to utilize your strengths and see some of those potential areas of growth and some of those areas that you've had to work through in your life as some of your superpowers. To really break that cookie cutter mold and make your own is a big thing. To manifest your dreams, to be putting in that work to develop that purpose, to understand what your why is really huge, because that is going to really motivate you on this path forward as you get into some of these action steps, as you get into some of these interview opportunities, and as you really manifest what that future is going to be for yourself. It's going to be important that you understand that purpose, that why, and what is going to be put into it to make all of that happen. So with that, like always, we want to close with a motivational video. So please take note of this video and how it really emphasizes what it takes to be successful and how key it is to knowing who you are and being proud of who you are and that path that it's taken for you to get here today.
I'm going to talk to you about some things I've learned in my journey. Most from experience, some of them I heard in passing, many of them I'm still practicing, but all of them I do believe are true. Life is not easy. It is not. Don't try to make it that way. Life's not fair. It never was. It isn't now, and it won't ever be. Do not fall into the trap, the entitlement trap, of feeling like you're a victim. You are not. Get over it and get on with it. So the question that we got to ask ourselves is what success is to us, what success is to you. Is it more money? That's fine. I got nothing against money. Maybe it's a healthy family. Maybe it's a happy marriage. Maybe it's to help others, to be famous, to be spiritually sound, to leave the world a little bit better place than you found it. Continue to ask yourself that question. Now your answer may change over time, and that's fine. But do yourself this favor. Whatever your answer is, don't choose anything that will jeopardize your soul. Prioritize who you are, who you want to be, and don't spend time with anything that antagonizes your character. Be brave, take the hill, but first answer that question, what's my hill? So first, we have to define success for ourselves. And then, we have to put in the work to maintain it. Take that daily tally. Tend our garden. Keep the things that are important to us in good shape. Where you are not is as important as where you are. It is just as important where we are not as it is where we are. Look, the first step that leads to our identity in life is usually not, I know who I am. I know who I am. That's not the first step. The first step's usually, I know who I am not. Process of elimination. Defining ourselves by what we are not is the first step that leads us to really knowing who we are. You know that group of friends that you hang out with that they really might not bring out the best in you? You know, they gossip too much or they're kind of shady. They really aren't going to be there for you in a pinch. Or how about that bar that we keep going to that we always seem to have the worst hangover from? Or that computer screen, right? That computer screen that keeps giving us an excuse not to get out of the house and engage with the world and get some real human interaction. Or how about that food that we keep eating? Stuff that tastes so good going down, it makes us feel like crap the next week, and we feel lethargic and we keep putting on weight. Well, those people, those places, those things, stop giving them your time and energy. Just don't go there. I mean, put them down. And when you do this, when you do put them down, when you quit going there, when you quit giving them your time, you inadvertently find yourself spending more time and in more places that are healthy for you, that bring you more joy. Why? Because you just eliminated the who's, the where's, the what's, and the when's that were keeping you from your identity. Like, trust me, too many options, I promise you, too many options will make a tyrant of us all. All right, so get rid of the excess, the wasted time. Decrease your options. If you do this, you will have accidentally, almost innocently, put in front of you what is important to you by process elimination. Knowing who we are is hard. It's hard. Give yourself a break. Eliminate who you are not first. And you're going to find yourself where you need to be. Instead of creating outcomes that take from us, let's create more outcomes that pay us back, fill us up, keep your fire lit, turn you on for the most amount of time in your future. We try our best, we don't always do our best. Well, architecture is a verb as well. And since we are the architects of our own lives, let's study the habits, the practices, the routines that we have that lead to and feed our success. Our joy, our honest pain, our laughter, our earned tears. Let's dissect that and give thanks for those things. And when we do that, guess what happens? We get better at them. And we have more to dissect. Be discerning. Choose it because you want it. Do it because you want to. We're going to make mistakes. You got to own them. Then you got to make amends. And then you got to move on. Guilt and regret kills many a man before their time. So turn the page, get off the ride. You are the author of the book of your life.
Thank you all for participating today in the Colby Olsen Learn, Earn, Achieve, and Dream Co-Lead program. It's brought to you by the Colby Olsen Foundation, and we are better together.